The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. For more information about our network and to check our additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericahealth.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the following program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Loss in our lives takes on many different forms and can be more than just a physical loss. It goes beyond that to include emotional loss, business loss, and loss of personal health. This is Voices for Healing with Cathy Roberts. Today, Cathy and her guests will help you find out that you are not alone in dealing with loss and grief. There are so many different ways to deal with loss. What works for some may not work for others. Together, let's find the solution that you can use. Here's your host, Cathy Roberts.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to Voices for Healing Talk Radio. I'm your host, Cathy Roberts, and in my work as a professional counselor, coach, and educator based in the Washington, D.C. area, I work with people expanding and growing in response to all sorts of loss and change in their lives. You can learn more about me and my work on my website, cathyroberts.net, and from there we can connect on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and more. You can also subscribe to this podcast, Voices for Healing, on iTunes and get regular downloads of this weekly show. I want to acknowledge Pathways Magazine for their support of this program. Pathways is a quarterly journal distributed throughout the Washington, D.C. area. You can pick up a copy at your favorite library or health food store. The summer issue is now available. And for listeners across the nation and around the world, if you're interested in Pathways Magazine, you can read Pathways, parts of Pathways, online at www.pathwaysmagazine.com. Each week, Voices for Healing features a guest who has expertise in some area of healing and finding opportunity. My wish for everyone listening is that you connect with some of what you hear on the shows and be inspired to use challenges to grow and become your most real, authentic self. Today, my guest is BJ Gallagher. BJ is the author of It's Never Too Late to Be What You Might Have Been, a guide to getting the life you want. Hello, BJ, and welcome to Voices for Healing.
Hi, thanks for the invitation, Cathy.
Yes, good to have you here, and let me let our listeners know something more about you before we get into our conversation.
Okay.
BJ Gallagher is a workplace consultant, author, and popular speaker. She writes business books that educate and empower, women's books that enlighten and entertain, and gift books that inspire and inform. Whether her audience is corporate executives, working women, or job seekers, her message is the power of positive doing. She motivates and teaches with empathy, understanding, and more than a little humor. BJ's international business bestseller, A Peacock in the Land of Penguins, has sold over 360,000 copies in 23 languages. And her latest book is the one we're talking about today. It's Never Too Late to Be What You Might Have Been. BJ is a regular Huffington Post contributor. She's been featured on CBS Evening News with Bob Schieffer, The Today Show with Matt Lauer, Fox News, PBS, CNN, and other television and radio programs. In addition to writing books, BJ conducts seminars and delivers keynotes at conferences and professional meetings across the country. We're really fortunate to have BJ here today with us, talking about this book that this comes up for me a lot in my work with people. I've spent much of my counseling career working with older adults, many of whom are, I started working with the geriatric population, actually, and now many of the people I work with are over the age of 50, some into their 60s and even 70s. And I hear this sometimes, people saying, I think it's too late for me to do X or to get Y, or I really want Z and I haven't done it yet. I don't know if I'll have a chance to do it. So I love the title of your book, loved reading the stories about people doing all kinds of things at all ages. And I'm wondering if maybe you could begin by telling us what inspired you to write this book, BJ, about reinventing ourselves.
Well, like a lot of writers, I write from my own experience. And the idea for this book actually came out of one of those experiences. It was a few months before a big birthday, one of those with the zeros at the end of it. And I was putting on my makeup one morning, and this voice came into my head, and it was a voice that I had heard many times in my life. It was the voice of hopelessness. And what he said to me was, "Give it up, honey. It's too late for you. No matter how much makeup you put on, you're never going to find the man of your dreams. And you know what? You're never going to write a bestseller either. And you're never going to make $1 million." And on and on and on. And, once hopelessness gets started, he really gets on a roll. And I must have been tired or a little vulnerable that day or something, but it sort of sunk in, and I kind of got bummed out for a few days. And then I forget what I was reading. I was reading something, and I came across this quote from George Eliot. "It's never too late to be what you might have been." And it just snapped me right out of my funk, and I thought, that's it. That's my new mantra for the rest of my life. And hopelessness, I'm not listening to you anymore. And it did. All it took was just that quote. It just seemed to land at the right time in the right spot. A few months later, I was talking with my friend Brenda Knight, who's a publisher, and I told her what had happened. She goes, "Oh, that's a great topic for a book. Would you write a book for us?" And I said, "Well, sure, that would be great." And that's how the book was born.
I love those moments of aha experiences where something you read or something that you hear really captures you and jolts you awake in a new kind of way. And that's what it sounds like that experience was for you.
It was. Every once in a while I see something or I hear something. It almost seems to have Broadway lights around it. It's like flashing. This one's for you, BJ. This one's for you. Pay attention. And so I've learned to pay attention. When it seems like the message is meant for me, I grab it and run with it. So I did.
Excellent point. And I'm not sure if you had this experience or not. Let me throw it out and see if you did. But when I have those kind of experiences, those words in Broadway lights like you describe aren't just something that I'm thinking in my brain, but I feel them enter into my body in some kind of way that makes it even more powerful and meaningful. Do you connect with that?
I do. I guess I would call it resonance. That it just resonates with me. There's a matching vibration. It's almost like when you meet somebody and you just know instantly that you're going to be good friends with them, or you see an outfit in a shop window and you go, "Oh, that's so me," or a car or a house or a dog. I had the same reaction when I met my little dog in a shelter, and I just knew instantly, "Oh, that one's for me." And so, yes, those messages, they resonate. There's almost a vibration to them.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes people want to know, well, how did you know that? How did you know that was for you? How is that so clear? And it is that vibratory resonance that you gave it such clarity as you talked about it in that way that can really help us know that, yeah, this is for me. This has more power. It's packing a more powerful punch as I hear it, as I see it, as I read it, than the other 1,000 words that I just read or the other words that I just heard in that video.
Right.
Yeah.
You feel the energy in your body. I'm reminded of a time when I had 2 job offers at the same time, and I couldn't decide which one to take. And so I called a good friend of mine, Warren Bennis, who teaches at USC. He's a leadership guru and just a really wonderful, wise man. And I said, "Can you help me here? I have these 2 job offers. They're both good. They pay well. They're both in Southern California," and so on and so forth. And he said, "Well, tell me about them." So I told him about the first one, and I told him about the second one. And he said, "Well, let me tell you what I hear when you're talking to me. I hear a different kind of energy when you're talking about the second job." He said, "If I were you, I would pay attention to that. Don't try to sort it out with your head. Sort it out with your heart and your gut. Listen to your own enthusiasm. Listen to your own energy, and that will give you the answer."
That is so true. I chose a graduate school in that same way. Looking at one program, I could feel my energy deflating. And that's the program I thought I wanted to be in. And that deflation of energy told me, that's just not the one. And that set me on a search looking for another program, which I later learned, my search was done online in 1997, and I later learned that this graduate program had gone online about 2 weeks before I began this search.
Oh, wow.
And as soon as I saw that program, which was Loyola University, Maryland's pastoral counseling program, my resonance with it was so great. I just couldn't wait to get involved in it.
You know, years ago, I read a book by Shakti Gawain called Living in the Light. Must have been at least 25, 30 years ago. And she says in that book that we human beings are like guided missiles. And we have a little microchip or something inside of us. We have a little guidance, an internal guidance system that's hooked in with the divine. And that when we meet someone or we see something or we have an experience that we resonate with, we just know that little guidance system is activated. And she called it following the light or living in the light. But you just know, oh, that's for me. And you also know, oh, that isn't for me. And when we really develop our intuitive wisdom, our own trust in that divine guidance system, it's very hard to go wrong. It's very hard to go wrong as long as you follow it.
Becomes very clear through that energy that we feel of what will work for us and what is just not right. The other program is a really great program, and a lot of people I know have gone through it, had great success in it. It wasn't for me. Yeah. And the other was. So that's just beautiful about seeing that. I like that image that you're giving us of seeing that kernel of what we feel as an inner light that we can follow. And as we follow that, there's still the uncertainty. We don't know where it's going to take us. We don't know what's going to happen. But we do know that this is our path. This is the one that is right for us.
Yes, and even if everybody else is going in a different direction, I remember years ago in my 40s when I hit menopause, and I had 3 doctors at the time who all said to take hormone replacements. And my gynecologist, my family practitioner, and an oncologist that I had seen a couple years earlier about a problem, and they all said, "Oh, you've hit menopause. It's time to take the hormones." And I don't know, but every fiber in my being said, "Nope, that's not for you." And I had no logical reason. I hadn't done any research. All I knew was it's like every cell was screaming, don't do that, don't do that. And so I didn't. I listened to my guidance rather than the 3 doctors. And son of a gun, if about 20 years later, this longitudinal study they were doing at I think it was Brigham and Women's Hospital, showed that that particular combination of hormones, not only did it not protect against heart disease, it increased the incidence of heart disease and stroke and heart attack, and it did nothing for your memory or your skin. And it was so... The results they were getting were so negative, they halted the study. And millions of women went off of hormones. And I thought, isn't that something? Something in my body knew that those hormones weren't right for me. I didn't know why. I just knew they weren't right for me. And I listened to it, and I was really glad I did.
Yeah, and I like that you brought that up, because one of the things that you listened to was yourself, and you allowed yourself to act in against the advice of the experts, so to speak.
Yes.
And so I think part of what BJ's talking about, and she brings up in her book as well, is we really are the experts on our own lives. And even though we may hear that this is the way that you run a business, or this is you have to do this by this age, or you're too old to exercise, or it's too late to find love, or whatever it is, none of those things have to be true when you're tuning into yourself and considering yourself to be the expert expert on your life and finding that own inner guidance system that you already have. You might have to do some digging around to uncover it, depending on how much of that you've already been doing. Mm-hmm. But I love that story because of what you were told by very knowledgeable, well-meaning people.
And yes, they cared about me. They were responsible. They were good doctors. And that was common medical knowledge at the time. And the thing that we know about science and medicine is that we're always discovering new things. And so something that was common medical practice at one time, some years later can be found out to be totally wrong. And I've been deeply influenced by reading Buddha's teachings. And he said, famously, most people have heard this, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. And what he means is not that you literally kill a Buddha, but that you have to decide for yourself what's right for you. And don't let anyone else run your life, even if he's a Buddha, even if he's a physician, even if he's a PhD or an MD or whatever, that ultimately it's your life, it's your body, it's your career, it's your future, it's your dream, and you alone are responsible for making those choices. You can be informed by experts, but don't abdicate to the experts, is what Buddha was saying. And I really like that message of, it's my life, I'm responsible, and I might even make some mistakes, but that's okay. I can't abdicate. I choose not to abdicate to anyone else, no matter whether he's wearing saffron robes or a white medical jacket or a clerical collar or anything else, that ultimately I have to decide what's right for me.
Yes, and that's where we find both our freedom and our responsibility. We're coming up on our first commercial break already. As we begin to take our break, hold your thoughts, BJ. I'll share something with you that writer Barbara Kingsolver says. And she says, the very least you can do with your life is figure out what you hope for. And the most you can do is live inside that hope. Not admire it from a distance, but live right in it, under its roof. We leave you with Barbara Kingsolver's thoughts as we take a quick commercial break, and we will be right back with BJ Gallagher.
Cathy Roberts is not only an exceptional radio host, she's an exceptional listener and counselor. Cathy appeals to motivated, high-functioning people to help them improve their health and vitality. Cathy can meet you where you are and help you identify what you want. Visit Cathy's website at www.cathyroberts.net or call her at 301-651-0019. Cathy works with both individuals and couples and specializes in grief and depression counseling. Get to know yourself by working with Cathy. Visit cathyroberts.net or call 301-651-0019.
You read about it in health news every day.
Cancer rates are going up. Obesity in the U.S. is on the rise. Heart disease and diabetes are top killers every year.
We can follow the advice of our doctor, but cravings persist. Weight goes up and energy is still down. It doesn't have to be like this. Tune in for Body Balance Talk with your host, Jeannie Schmidt, along with Lucy and Madeline. You'll learn how you can work with your body to feel better and look better, too. Body Balance Talk airs live every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time on Voice America Health and Wellness.
Cathy Roberts offers Circle of Voices teleclasses to help you focus your mind, engage your energy, and awaken your inner guide. Through this experiential and interactive series, you will know yourself more and learn to express yourself authentically in your personal life. Visit Cathy's website at cathyroberts.net to find out about this teleclass series designed to open you to change and engage healing in the fabric of your life. Go to cathyroberts.net or call Cathy at 301-651-0019 for more information. You are listening to Voices for Healing with your host, Cathy Roberts. If you have a question or comment for the program, please send an email to Cathy at cathyroberts.net. That's Cathy at cathyroberts.net. Now back to Voices for Healing.
Welcome back to Voices for Healing with Cathy Roberts and guest BJ Gallagher. BJ talked to people who've made changes in all different areas of life, and she wrote about it, and it's never too late to be what you might have been. As we begin this segment, I want to share a quote from one of the people BJ wrote about. In one of her chapters and early in the book, she interviewed a couple named Lori and Harvey, and Lori said, "Imagine living your life knowing you never even tried to achieve what was in your heart meaningful to you." And that really struck me as someone who branched off into a second career in midlife and made the choice of what I wanted to do based on what was most meaningful to me. So I'm interested in BJ's thoughts and what people you talk to have shared with you about the choices they made, the ones they're glad they made, ones that maybe they came to regret over time.
Well, I love that. I love that story that you quoted from Lori and her husband. They were a particularly interesting couple who actually stepped off of the fast lane because they found it wasn't fulfilling. They were living in Manhattan. They had a beautiful penthouse apartment. They had a home in the Hamptons. She was an advertising copywriter, and he worked for a paper company and had worked his way up to be an executive. And I think they were about in their 40s when this happened. And it happened with Lori first. She just began to feel like, is this all there is? Is this it? Have we reached the pinnacle? And somehow it wasn't what she thought it was going to be. And they began to have conversations about it, and they decided that neither one of them were feeling terribly fulfilled in their lives, and yet they looked like they had everything. They had money, they went to all the A parties, they had property, they had prestige, but it didn't bring them the kind of happiness that they thought it should bring them. So they actually downsized. They ended up, after sort of doing a geographic search, they ended up in North Carolina. They quit their jobs. They sold their Hamptons place. They sold their apartment. And she became a dog groomer. And he became a small business coach, coaching entrepreneurs living in this, I think they live in Asheville, North Carolina. And I just thought that was wonderful because it takes a lot of courage to make the choice to walk away from everything your society says is the epitome of success. That was a really powerful choice. To get off the fast lane and live a slower, simpler lifestyle. So, yeah, I mean, all the people in the book made choices along the way, but I found Lori and her husband's choice particularly interesting because it seemed so counterintuitive.
Yeah, they really went with their values. And it sounds like they did what we were talking about earlier, too. Like they felt inside themselves and something wasn't right, even though on the outside everything looked really great about what they had. And as they did this kind of value search about what they wanted, they ended up with something really different than maybe what their friends thought they might do and other people might have commented on. You know, I wanted to ask about that in terms of the naysayers. You know, when we do something that's outside the box or a little bit different, or as I did, you know, go to a school that has a counseling program rather than a different kind of program. At the time I did that, the state of Maryland didn't even license counselors. So I was really, in a way, taking a kind of risk by following my heart. Mm-hmm. And we have naysayers along the way who say, you know, well, wouldn't this be better? Wouldn't you have more opportunities if you do this? And that sort of thing. And, How did the people that you talked to for this book, how did they deal with those people when they were doing what they wanted to do, what their heart desired, and it wasn't what other people maybe expected?
Well, they listened to their hearts. And that's one of the pieces of advice I share with people when they ask me about taking a risk, following a dream, is that the people who are closest to you, very often your family and friends, are the biggest naysayers. And the reason is they love you and they're afraid for you. It's not that they're critical or mean or that they're not supportive for some ulterior motive. That they're not being supportive is really their desire to protect you from making a mistake, from doing something that they think is foolish, from doing something that doesn't fit with their values, so they assume they're your values too. And so sometimes we have to keep our dreams and our goals and our plans a secret from the people that we'd like to be most supportive, but they're not. I've certainly run into that with my parents when I became self-employed in 1991. Both my parents were, "You're going to what? Oh my God, you need," and it took them years to stop suggesting that I go get a real job. Why? Because they loved me and they were afraid. And my job was to not let their fear stop me from following my destiny.
Yes. And your point about needing to protect our dreams, I think is an important one, that sometimes we can get excited about something, an idea we have, and we've probably all done this as little children and maybe as adults. We get so excited about something that we want to share it, and then when we share it, what we hear can be crushing in response. And as we get older and more mature, we may go ahead and do it anyway. But I do see that need to protect that kind of infant idea that is germinating in us, and we are not quite sure where it's going or how it's going to go. But we want to protect it so that it develops enough inside of us and we get firm enough in it that we can meet whatever's coming our way about it.
I agree completely. The metaphor I use is that your idea is a seed, and then the seed sprouts into a little sapling, a little plant, but it's very tender and it's very green, and it's delicate and fragile. And if you expose it to the wrong people, they might just stomp on it and kill it before it has a chance to really get strong and resilient enough to stand on its own. So I've certainly done that myself many, many times. When I've got a new idea or a new project or a new goal, I usually don't share it with anyone until it's had a time to really grab some roots and really get a little bit stronger, because I don't want to expose it to the world and have it get trampled or blown away or dismissed or whatever. If I do share it with someone, I share it with someone that I already know I can trust and confide in, and that they won't stomp on it. But mostly I just keep those little seedlings to myself until they're bigger and stronger, and then I'll share them with the world.
Yeah. As we talk about this, we're tapping into one of the barriers that I think people face when they're in the process of reinventing themselves, and that is the reactions of other people. I'm interested in what you've learned about what other barriers people come up against when they're making some decisions and maybe stepping outside the box like Lori and Harvey did. What other kind of things can begin to trip people up?
Well, the other big thing is their own fear. The first thing I interviewed last year. I interviewed Mark Allen, who's the publisher of New World Publishing, and he's written a number of books, including one called The Magical Path. And he said the first thing that comes up as soon as you set a goal, or as soon as you create a vision of what you want your life to look like, or your career to look like, or your finances to look like, the very next thing that happens is self-doubt and fear attack you, your own self-doubt and your own fear. And he said, that's the real work of making a dream come true, is dealing with your own self-doubt and your own fear and the stories that you have about yourself. Oh, I could never do that. Oh, I need a regular paycheck. I could never be self-employed. Or, oh, I could never, I could never attract a man like that. Or I could never accumulate enough money. So we have these stories that we've been telling ourselves, these self-limiting beliefs. And I love what Mark says, that that's the real work of making a dream come true, is conquering your own self-doubt, your fear, and the negative beliefs and stories that you've been living with a long time. That's the real work.
I so resonate with that. That is so true. What's the next step? What would Mark say or you say? I have some ideas about it myself as well. Yeah, but what's the next thing that you do when you have this vision, you have this idea, the doubts and fears begin to play their games with us because they do that all the time. What do we do? How do we move through that?
Well, two things have worked for me. And one is, actually, it was a title of a book I think Susan Jeffers wrote. It's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway.
I love the title of that book. I don't think I've read it because I think I thought I could probably write it.
That's true. Well, that's the thing about a great book title like that is you don't have to read it. You just got the message.
Yeah, that's right.
If the title's good, it's like, oh, got the message. I never read it either, but I got the message.
I know. I love it. I love the book, even though I haven't read it because that title is so meaningful.
Me too. The other one I love is Happiness is a Choice. Mm-hmm. You don't even have to read the book. You got the message that in any circumstance you can choose to be happy. And similarly, in any circumstance you can choose to be courageous. That fear won't kill you. Fear doesn't mean don't do it. Fear is just your mind's way of trying to protect you from danger. But like an overprotective mother, fear can paralyze you if you don't sort of gauge, well, now what's a realistic fear? Like a realistic fear is you don't step out in front of a bus. Okay, that's a good fear to have. That's a really good fear to have. But a bad fear to have is one that says, oh, that's too risky. Oh, don't do that. Oh, what if you embarrass yourself? What if you fall on your face? What if... And the other thing I use is self-talk. I have conversations with myself. So being a self-employed person, when the terror comes up, oh, goodness, I'm running out of money. What am I going to do? And then I sit down and have a conversation with myself saying, well, okay, so say you run out of money. What's the worst thing that could happen? And then I answer myself and I say, well, the worst thing that could happen is I wouldn't be able to pay the mortgage. Okay, then what would happen? Well, okay, then I might lose the house. Okay, and then what would happen? Well, I'd be homeless. I wouldn't have any place to live. Well, then what would happen? Well, I suppose I could always go stay with my mother, or I could stay with my son or some friends. And then the final question is, will anybody die from this? And if the answer is no, then I think, okay, then I can live with it. You know, if it's not a life or death decision, and 99.9% of the decisions we make aren't life or death, then I can live with a certain amount of anxiety and fear. And the other thing, a wise friend once told me that 99% of the choices we make are renegotiable. So if you make a choice, you take a risk, you try something, it doesn't work out, you go, well, that didn't work out. Okay, I think I'll try something else. So you can go back and renegotiate and take a different direction. Unless it's a life or death decision, like pulling the plug on somebody's ventilator or having to deal with the question of an unwanted pregnancy, unless they're life or death decisions like that, go ahead and try something, because if it doesn't work out, you could try something else. And if that doesn't work out, you try something else. You just keep trying stuff. And I love what Thomas Edison said. He invented the light bulb. He said, I have not failed. I simply found 10,000 ways that didn't work. I find freedom in that.
Yeah.
Okay, 10,000 ways it didn't work. That makes me feel better.
Yeah, I love that quote, too.
He was a smart guy, and he had to make a bajillion mistakes before he invented the light bulb. I think, okay, that gives me permission to make lots of trial and error decisions.
Yes, and I just said, I think I was talking about perfectionism with somebody lately, and I just said to them, I'm really glad Edison wasn't a perfectionist, or we would be sitting here in the dark, because he would have given up long before he made those 10,000 tries.
That's right.
So it's funny that you bring him up again. I was also thinking, I do that same tracing things back, what would happen if this happens? What's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? And I sat here, I guess 4.5 years ago, we had a big storm here in the Washington area that we call Snowmageddon, and I had water pouring in the back of my house. And I've always thought of my house as my security blanket. It's as long as I have my house, everything will be secure. And so here I was watching all this water pouring in, and I was wondering if I should make a claim to my insurance agency or not. Anyway, after tracing it all down, I thought, well, even if I lost every single thing, I still have myself. Maybe security isn't what I thought it was or think it is. And I have to keep reminding myself of this again and again. Maybe security is really something inside of me that will figure out how I'll deal with whatever it is that's going to happen. Maybe security is somewhere lies in my own creativity rather than in something I think I have, rather than in some material possession.
Oh, I agree with that completely. For me, security is spiritual. For me, the only security is what I choose to call God. And that's the only thing that's eternal. That's the only thing that is secure. As the Buddha said, all is transitory. Everything dies, everything disintegrates, everything falls apart. There isn't a job you can't lose, a house that can't burn down, a loved one that won't die or leave you. Everything changes, everything falls apart and leaves, except for the eternal, however you think about that. And I find enormous freedom in that it helps me stop clinging to things that I think are going to bring me security, whether it's money or a job or a title or none of that. It's all, that was one of the blessings of the Great Recession is millions and millions of people learned that what they thought was secure was an illusion. It wasn't. Yeah. And the real security is either inside yourself or in your spiritual life, in your relationship with the transcendent.
Yes, I would agree with all that you just said. It is time for us to take our second break. As we go out on our break, I'd like our listeners to think about this. We've been talking, BJ and I, about a variety of things about her book. It's never too late to be what you might have been. And one thing that I would ask our listeners is, what would a daring first step for you to take be as you've listened to what we've talked about? What is one thing you might do to get the life you love? And that may be an action. It may be a way of thinking. It may be some kind of shift inside of you. These are questions for you to think about as we take a commercial break, and we will be right back.
Cathy Roberts offers Circle of Voices teleclasses to help you focus your mind, engage your energy, and awaken your inner guide. Through this experiential and interactive series, you will know yourself more and learn to express yourself authentically in your personal life. Visit Cathy's website at cathyroberts.net to find out about this teleclass series, designed to open you to change and engage healing in the fabric of your life. Go to cathyroberts.net or call Cathy at 301-651-0019 for more information. Have you ever taken a minute to think about how your joints work from the outside? Tendons and ligaments are stiff enough to hold our bones together, but flexible enough to allow them to articulate and move. Our joints are not simple hinges, but highly adaptable structures that allow an amazing range of motion. They also allow an amazing adaptability to injury. Find out more by tuning in to Rethinking Orthopedics with Mary J. Rogel, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, on Voice America Health and Wellness. It's time to take a new look at the body. Cathy Roberts is not only an exceptional radio host, she's an exceptional listener and counselor. Cathy appeals to motivated, high-functioning people to help them improve their health and vitality. Cathy can meet you where you are and help you identify what you want. Visit Cathy's website at www.cathyroberts.net or call her at 301-651-0019. Cathy works with both individuals and couples and specializes in grief and depression counseling. Get to know yourself by working with Cathy. Visit cathyroberts.net or call 301-651-0019. You are listening to Voices for Healing with your host, Cathy Roberts. If you have a question or comment for the program, please send an email to Cathy at cathyroberts.net. That's Cathy at cathyroberts.net. Now back to Voices for Healing.
As we begin our concluding segment of the program, I want to thank my colleagues at Core Constellation Center in Rockville, Maryland, for their support of this program, Voices for Healing. This is Cathy Roberts speaking. BJ Gallagher, author of It's Never Too Late to Be What You Might Have Been, is with me. And as we begin our concluding segment, I'd like for you, BJ, to have a chance to tell us about upcoming projects, events you might have happening, and how our listeners can reach you.
Well, I'm very easy to find on the Internet. I have a couple of web pages, bjgallagher.com and womenneedtoknow.com with the number 2, womenneedtoknow.com. People can, I write for Huffington Post. They can read my columns there. I'm also easily findable on Facebook and Twitter, so I'm an easy person to find if anyone wants to contact me or engage in further conversation. That would be great. And my books, particularly the new one, should be available in your local bookstore. And if not, then there's always good old Amazon.com.
Very good. Listeners, BJ's last name is spelled Gallagher, so that can help you in your finding her. One of the other people you wrote about in your book, BJ, suggests that when we're going through changes and we're discerning what we would like to do differently and reinvent ourselves, one of the people said, sometimes we just need to stop looking and be quiet and listen. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that completely. I have found that my higher power whispers, and so it doesn't shout. It doesn't make a lot of noise. There are no trumpets from heaven announcing messages before I get them. They often come as quiet intuitions or quiet thoughts, and so I have to make sure that I have quiet time in my life, that I make time for meditation, that I spend more time listening than talking. You know, we live in such a busy, noisy world. There's a lot of noise coming at us all the time from social media, newspapers, television, radio, that it's really important to turn everything off sometimes and just make sure that we've got enough quiet time in each day to listen to our own internal guidance system, to listen to divine guidance, to reflect and savor the moment and the messages that are coming at us. And if we're too busy or too noisy, I think we run the risk of muddying the waters, and it's hard to get clear when we're stirring things up all the time.
Yeah, and some of the studies show that it doesn't take a whole lot of quiet time to make a really huge difference in our lives. I believe the work of Herbert Benson has indicated that about 11 minutes a day really makes a difference, 11 to 18 minutes. And in addition to what BJ just said, I'll piggyback on it, that some of this stuff we're talking about in terms of paying attention to what you're feeling, what you're resonating with, following that inner light, hearing that whisper of spirit, all of that can happen when we get quiet enough. And over time, that quietness builds a kind of awareness. So our awareness is greater, and we're more attentive to what's incoming than we are when we're keeping busy.
Yes, we Americans tend to be uncomfortable with silence. If you watch people get on an airplane, the first thing they do is pull out the magazine in front of them, or they pull out the book they're reading, or they plug in some earphones and they're listening to their own personal music device. And we, as a culture, we seem to have a hard time with silence and quiet and just being present to our own thoughts and experiences and sensations. But I find the more that I've unplugged from those things, and the more I just sit and watch and pay attention and listen and be awake, whether I'm walking the dog or I'm waking up in the morning or whatever it is, just having a cup of coffee at Starbucks, just being awake and present. I mean, that's what enlightenment really is just being awake to everything that's going on around you and everything that's going on inside of you. It's just being fully present to each moment. But if we're talking too much or running around too much or being too busy, we just totally lose track of what's going on in the moment.
Yeah, I think sometimes we do that busyness to distract ourselves from what is uncomfortable inside of us. We all have, I've talked before on this show about how we have a lot of light in us, and we also have shadow that we deal with. And those shadows are things that we don't really want to maybe know about ourselves because they're hard to look at. Oh, I can be that selfish. Oh, do I really want to look at that? And so I think that's part of what makes it hard. People, I know when I first began to meditate and got quiet, what happened, I thought I might experience bliss because that's what I was reading about was happening. But that wasn't what happened for me. What I found when I began getting quiet was a bunch of stuff that I hadn't wanted to look at began to come up. And that's a necessary part of it as well. And I think that's what people can expect. That may not happen for everybody. But if that does, if you do decide you're going to, I'm going to do what Cathy and BJ are talking about. I'm going to spend 11 minutes in quiet time. Oh, look what's coming up. I didn't think it was supposed to be this way. Well, it just is. And that's partly why you're doing it. So you can get friendly with all those different parts inside yourself.
The problem is we want to judge those things as good or bad. And the truth is they're not good or bad. Those are human constructs. Consider the possibility that there is no good or bad. There just is what is. And being awake to, oh, look, I'm feeling grumpy. Oh, look, I'm angry. Oh, look, I had a selfish thought. Ooh, gee. And to just be present to your feelings and refrain from judging them, just to have them, but not judge them. It's really a process of coming to terms with our humanity. We are angels and we are devils. We are animals and we are enlightened beings. We are these very complex, fascinating creatures, but we've been taught to be so judgmental, particularly of ourselves, that we can't bear things that we don't feel good about, mistakes we've made or things we've said or things we've done. So coming to terms with our own humanity and finding just some peace and self-acceptance, like, oh, wow, I really messed up today. Like, yeah, well, welcome to the human race. Tomorrow's another day. Maybe you'll do better tomorrow. And you I love what G.K. Chesterton said, that angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. And that if we could take ourselves a little more lightly, our good stuff and our bad stuff, and just realize we're not all that important. Just lighten up a little bit and take a look at your humanity, and you'll find you're probably just a garden variety human being like everybody else.
That's right. That is so true. And I would add two other emotions that we feel to those things that we tend to judge. We talked about fear earlier, but embarrassment and shame keep coming up into my mind throughout our conversation today as we're talking, because some of the things that we think are terrible mistakes and we feel them deeply in us and they kind of cut to the core, we can be embarrassed about or feel ashamed of. And those are really things that are part of our aliveness and part of our humanity. When we share them with somebody else, a safe person to share something with, we find out that, they've experienced something like that too. They know exactly what we're feeling, what we're talking about. And I think that shame and embarrassment can sometimes get in the way of things that and it ties in completely with fear, because what are we afraid of but shame and embarrassment at times. And so as we begin to befriend those things and, like you said, take them more lightly, we can feel really heavy in some of these emotional states. And as we begin to say, this is a part of being human. This is a part of being alive. Feeling all of this is part of what we're here doing and learning from.
Yes, we're having human experiences. I've been very involved the last couple of years taking care of my elderly mother who has Alzheimer's. And particularly the last few months, she fell, she broke a hip, she had surgery, the nursing home brought her, the whole thing. And I'm really it's exhausting, but I'm really seeing the full range of my mother's emotions, and even more intensely, the full range of my emotions. So I can feel warm and endearing, and I love my mother, and she's so cute, and other times it's like, geez, will she shut up? I am so sick of this and I go, wow, look, you're just like, buckle up, honey. Life is a roller coaster, and in the course of one day, I can have the full range of feelings about my mother: deep love, deep resentment, frustration, disappointment, grief, anticipatory grief, because I know the disease is killing her. My mother's dying, and all of that. It's, wow, this is what it means to be a human being. And most important, not to run away from those feelings by grabbing a drink or a donut or whatever it is. This is what fuels addictions, is our inability to be in our own skin. Just to be in our own skin and feel life and feel our own feelings, that this is what drives people to dull the pain, that millions of people can't do life without some sort of anesthesia, whether it's carbohydrates or alcohol or nicotine or whatever, that we just really have a hard time being present to life.
Yeah, and we really fear pain, if, like what you talked about before, as if we think it will kill us, and of course it won't. Well, tell me, BJ, do you have a favorite story about someone getting the life they love from your book? You talked about Lori and Harvey's story, and I love that. And is there another one that really stands out?
There's one. It's not in the book, but I heard it recently on NPR just a few weeks ago about this a Polish woman. Her name was Olga. I can't remember her last name, and I probably couldn't pronounce it even if I could remember it. But she was an amazing woman. She just died a couple of weeks ago. But at 77. She decided to take up track and field, which is running, hurdling, just not tennis, not badminton, not swimming. She took up track and field. She lived to be 95 years old, and for the last 18 years of her life, she traveled the world. She competed in all of these great track and field events. And when I heard her story on NPR, because being athletic is probably my favorite, the thing I want to work on the most. I spent the first half of my life being an intellectual. I want to spend the second half being a jock. But I heard her story, and I thought, wow, I'm 10 years younger than she is. I'm in my 60s. If I start now, think what I could do in the next 20 or 30 years. And so I particularly love the stories about people who get their bodies in motion, because moving your body, it's the closest thing we have to the fountain of youth. It cures depression, you lose weight, you make friends, you feel good, you look good. So if I was going to close with a story, I'd close with that one. Her name was Olga.
Olga. I think I remember hearing that story and being amazed by it too. And I thought about your story in your book where you have a couple, I can't remember their name, maybe Rama and Joe as their names.
Oh, yes, Rama and Joe. Yeah, they're good.
Yeah, and they're in their 80s, and they're going out to the gym every day and doing their exercises at the gym, which I just think is phenomenal too.
Yeah, and they started in late life. I think they started in their 60s, particularly the wife. The husband had been a little more athletic, but I think she didn't start going to the gym till she was in her 60s or 70s. And yes, I love those stories about older folks being athletic. I think, okay, put on my running shoes and get my butt out the door.
Yeah, it really challenges our cultural perceptions, because we hear a lot about people physically declining, and I love the stories about the older people who are moving in the opposite direction and doing the opposite. Well, it's hard to believe, BJ, but our hour has really passed so quickly. I've loved having this conversation with you about your wonderful book, It's Never Too Late to Be What You Might Have Been, a guide to getting the life you love. And I really hope that our listeners can begin to feel some of the excitement that you and I have as people past the midlife point, if we consider that 50, who are still interested in growing and learning and reinventing ourselves. So.
Well, we live so long. If we don't keep reinventing ourselves, I would think it would be very boring. And I, for one, just like to try new things and have adventures. And what the heck? I mean, the goal isn't to play it safe and die unscathed. The goal is to live full out. And when you die, then you're all spent. It's like, whoo-hoo, I used up every bit of energy I had, and now I'm just a little cinder. And out I go. It's like, but that's me. I mean, that's just how
great.
I approach my life.
It.
Yeah.
Stay with me for a minute. We're going to end here in just a moment, and I'd like to have you just stay on the line for a moment after we end. So thank you so much for being with me, BJ. It's been a real delight to share your thoughts with our listeners.
Oh, we had a great time, didn't we?
We really did. Join me next week here on Voices for Healing when author Polly Campbell will be with us. She'll be talking about her book, Imperfect Spirituality, Extraordinary Enlightenment for Ordinary People. Until then, this is Cathy Roberts saying, transform your life, embrace vitality.
Thank you for listening to Voices for Healing. Please join Cathy Roberts again next Monday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. We wish you the best recovery from your loss, and we'll talk again next week.
Thanks again for listening to the preceding program, brought to you on the Voice America Health and Wellness Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit voiceamericahealth.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit voiceamerica.com. The views and ideas expressed on the preceding program are strictly those of the host or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.